Hello, welcome to the Common Sense Student. My name is David. Today's topic is bankruptcy is not for you. Please like this video and also feel free to leave a comment. And if you are not already a Common Sense student, please subscribe to our channel. So I'm going to tell you a true story. It's about a guy that came to my workplace, our place of business, some years ago. He tried to sell me some kitchen knives. I never bought the kitchen knives, but I was very impressed with his drive and energy, because not only was he selling kitchen knives, he was also selling car parts. Yes, I'm not joking, car parts. I've never seen anybody go around with a bag selling car parts. But he had he had wiper blades, he had rotor disc, he had alternators. Whatever it is that could hold in that bag, he had it. He eventually grew his business, and now he eventually had a small shop on a plaza, and he was now selling computer and office supplies. From what I observed, I thought he was doing very well, and I'm sure he believed the same thing also. Until one day he was sharing a story with me. It was about something that was happening within his business. He said that ever since this employee left, persons were coming to his organization, to his business, with items for various reasons. Either they were returning it or they had inquiries, and he couldn't find any record of the sale on his computer system. We know what happened. Anyway, I asked him if he had an inventory of all the stock he had. He said no. I was very surprised by this, because I couldn't imagine that you are operating a business and you're not keeping track of even your inventory. I advised him, luckily, to get someone to help him to do an audit. He did just that, and he was very thankful, because he was rescued from the brink of financial ruin. He now knew where his business was heading, and although he couldn't ascertain exactly all that he had lost, he had a direction and he had a firm footing to build his business on. Principles, as we know, are universal, and they control life. What the story I just told you about my friend has some very good principles. And we know that you can take one principle from one area of life and apply it to another area in your life, because we are common sense students. So for instance, the principle of gravity. Gravity is a universal principle. It will work anywhere, and it can be applied by anyone, and the results are predictable. Just like NASA engineers have to understand and apply gravity, so too do architects who are building these skyscrapers. It's a universal principle. I said that because I'm making a point. The point is this: you can take an accounting principle that I just explained about my friend's business, and you can apply that accounting principle to any area of our lives. We can do an audit, for example, of our finances, of our beliefs, of our emotions, anything we want to audit. But today we are going to do an audit of our relationships, because we don't want to be having bankrupt relationships and be ignorant of it. So let me go further. Let me explain some things about relationships. Relationships, there are different types of relationships. That's obvious. You have family, you have friendships, you have intimate relationships, and intimate relationships can be marriage or otherwise. And we know that relationships have tremendous importance to all of us. Relationships give us a sense of security. It contributes to our happiness, to our mental health, mental and physical health. It gives our lives meaning. But relationships are a double-edged sword, because all the benefits I've just mentioned, on the reverse, or the opposite effect of that, is that a relationship can be the bane of your existence. It can actually destroy and damage your life. All of these benefits can be menaces to your life, or vices to your life. It can wreak havoc on your physical and mental health. It can devastate your happiness and well-being. It can make you fearful. So I'm happy you're here today, and I have a lot of information to give to you. I know you are going to enjoy this video. Please stay tuned. So in this segment, I'm going to give you some facts about an audit. I'm going to tell you what an audit is and some principles, and we are going to compare those principles to our own lives. We are common sense students, so we know that we love principles. So what is an audit? An audit is a detailed investigation into the financial information, methods, and procedures of a business. So what are the financial information what financial information we are talking about? We are talking about balance sheets, we are talking about income statements, we are talking about cash flow statements. You might not be familiar with these things if you're not in accounting, but you're familiar with your bank statement, you're familiar with your credit card statement, you're familiar with your checkbook. If you're still using a checkbook, I don't know, many persons are not using checks today, but if you are, you can always do an audit or reconciliation where you can match whatever you're spending or what you have gone from your account with what you had, and you can track the dates, etc., and make certain assumptions about your spending. It's the same thing within a business. You can look at these different statements I just mentioned, and you can do an audit of whatever it is that is happening financially within the business. You can also look at the procedures, the way things are done. Say if you're getting the best bang for your buck, if these procedures are correct, are being done correctly. There are so many advantages from doing an audit. Now let's do a common sense comparison. We can audit the way our lives functions, the things that makes us happy, the reasons we are failing. I mentioned earlier also that we can audit our finances, our beliefs, and our emotions. So any part of our life can be audited. Nothing is off limit. So who does an audit? An audit is done by a CIA, a certified internal auditor, not by the Central Intelligence Agency. Before I forget, let me mention to you about a parrot that we had. It was a pet parrot. His name was Pedro. He was a CIC agent. He couldn't keep his beak shut. Anything he heard, heard or saw, he repeated it. The last thing I heard that he was now living in the witness protection program for pets. Enough about Pedro. So an audit is done by a certified internal auditor, and it can be done internally by an internal auditing department. If the business has an internal auditing department, they can do their own auditing. Or they can hire an agent from outside. Someone can come in to the company and do an audit. And or an audit can be done by a governmental agency like the IRS. So there are different ways of doing an audit, internally or externally. It all depends. Just like with our own lives, we can do an internal audit or we can do an external audit. I'm going to explain that further in this video. So let's do a common sense comparison. We can be our own CIA. We can be our own auditor. We can solicit help, but it cannot be from anyone that's directly related to the area we're investigating. So an audit has to be independent so that it has integrity. And so we have to make sure that if you're auditing something in your relationship and it concerns a particular person, yes, you can get some information from them, but you cannot involve them in the audit. If you understand what I'm saying, it has to be independent. Next, what's the purpose of an audit? A business do an audit to find financial problems, to catch errors, to make better business decisions, improve profits and viability, financial viability. With our own lives, we could say we can do an audit of our life to fix issues, problems that are hindering us and eliminate harmful elements from our lives. And these elements can be people, our bad habits. And this enables us to make better business, make better decision making, get better results, and make our lives better. That's self-explanatory. So what's the premise of an audit? Why do we really do it? And what do we really want to learn? Or what is it really based on? The premise of an audit is this. It measures business procedures against predetermined business or governmental policies and standards. So let me explain it further. So remember I said that we have principles, and these principles are universal. They are ordained They are set out by life, they govern life. And then we have our own way of doing things. And the way we do things are based on our own principles. Maybe we are not obeying these principles over here. We can always take these principles and measure against what's happening over here, or what the principles are in reality. It's just the same, for example, with a business. A business can have its own business policies, and then there are government policies. But the business might be operating contrary to both of these policies. And that's where an audit comes into the fray, where it measures what's actually happening against what should be happening. So the next thing is, let's do a common sense comparison of this premise. We evaluate what we're doing and the results we have gained to the standards and principles we should be following, like I just explained. So what is audited? In a business, different departments can be audited, and different systems can be audited. So you can audit the marketing department, even the accounts department, any department, operations, you name it. And you can audit different systems also within the business. You can audit accounting, payroll, operations, or the information system of the business. We can do a common sense comparison here. We can audit our relationships, whether we are benefiting from the investments in our relationships. Or we can audit our habits, our finances, our fears, our strengths and weaknesses. There are certain guidelines that an auditor must adhere to. And these guidelines are set out by an international organization that oversees all auditors, and all auditors obey or submit to these standards. Look at this diagram. You can see integrity at the top, and we are going in a clockwise direction. Fair presentation, due professional care, independence, confidentiality, evidence-based approach, risk-based assessment. I got this information from their website, so these are not my words or explanations. And I will go further in explaining what each word means. So integrity, the foundation of professionalism. Fair presentation, the obligation to report truthfully and accurately. Due professional care, the application of diligence and judgment in auditing. Confidentiality, security of information. Pedro could not be an auditor, as you can see, because he's not a confidential person. Independence, the basis for the impartiality of the audit and objectivity of the audit conclusions. And evidence-based approach, the rational method for reaching reliable and reproducible audit conclusions in a systematic audit. And lastly, risk-based approach, an audit approach that considers risk and opportunities. So let me explain this. Those points I just mentioned, as I said before, I never came up with these qualifications or guidelines for an auditor. They're actually international standards that all auditors must obey. Next, these guidelines, if you realize, like integrity and so forth, they're talking about the character of an auditor. An auditor must have certain basic characteristics, ethics, etc., morals. And then there are expectations. They must be independent, confidential, and so forth. So if we are going to do our own audit, we also must have certain traits, certain character traits, or certain basic guidelines that we live by if we are going to be authentic, if we are going to be fair. So look at this chart. It looks more like a donut than a pie chart. But let's start with integrity. Integrity, diligence, fairness, evidence-driven mindset, and risk. I'm going to explain in more detail. But if you can look at this chart, you can see that I've come up with 5 basic guidelines that I believe that all auditors must adhere to. And I'm talking about we being our own internal auditors. So if we start with integrity, we should only expect what we're willing to give. So you cannot do an audit, for example, of someone, and then you're implying or expecting certain things from them that you are not also willing to give in the relationship. Next, judge others only by principles you live by. You cannot audit anyone on principles that are alien to your own life. You have to believe and live by these same principles. You should have high moral standards. That goes without explanation. Then we have diligence. We should be thorough. We should be conscientious. We should do what is right. Fairness. We should be impartial, no favoritism. So if we were going to, for example, in our present scenario, do an audit of our relationships. Our relationship with our spouse should be judged on the same principles as our relationships with our parents, our siblings, or so forth. Whatever relationship you're going to judge, it must be judged on some objective and common principles, and everybody should be treated fairly, no partiality here. Next, we have evidence-driven mindset. We should base our audit only on direct experience, not from what you're told, not from what you heard, but from your own direct experience, and also from data or facts that you have acquired. And there's always risk in every facet of our life, even with doing an audit. So if we are going to do an audit, we must bear in mind that we are never independent of our own biases, whether emotional or cultural, and we are prejudiced in ways we are not aware of. So we must always bear these things in mind when we are going to do an audit of anyone or anything, so that we can be fair and objective. So I just explained some personal characteristics that all auditors should have. Now I'm going to talk about some accounting principles that all business adhere to. So whether the business is manufacturing a product, or it's offering a service, or it's for profit or non-profit, all businesses make revenue. The revenue must be accounted for in the income statement and within the period it was incurred. All businesses also incur expenses. So they must keep a record of all their invoices and receipts, and they must be accounted for within the period they were incurred. Then you must match your revenues and your expenses within the period, accounting period, they were incurred. So for instance, business operate within quarters, 4 quarters as a matter of fact. So the first quarter might be, say, from mid-January to mid-April. All revenues and expenses must be accounted for within that period. And then you have the calendar year. All revenues and expenses must be accounted for within the entire calendar year, which includes all those quarters I just mentioned. So also, you must match your revenues and expenses within each quarter. And next, you must also have full disclosure, where there's no personal opinion or misleading information whenever you're doing whatever auditing that's taking place within the business. So earlier I forgot to mention a very important relationship. I spoke about your family relationship, intimate relationships, and friendships. Yes, my memory is going. But I never mentioned the most important relationship of all, and I did that deliberately, and that's the relationship we have with ourselves. That's the most important relationship. It is often ignored. We are unconscious of it. But this relationship sets the tone for our external relationships. As you can see from the chart, you have relationship principles. So just like accounting principles are all businesses have revenues, expenses, etc. And then you have our own relationship principles that we live by. There are not any cemented or concrete plan or principles that's set out by any international organization. I've come up with about 5 of my own, and you can do the same. So I came up with quality, belief, happiness, loyalty, and care. I believe that these are relationship principles that all relationships, whether it's internal or external, should submit, obey, or adhere to. So you can come up with your own, but I believe these are some good principles. So let's start with quality, for example. So first, as I said, you must satisfy the demand internally. So we should be making ourselves a better quality person. We should be truthful to ourselves. We should have positive self-criticism, that's holding ourselves accountable. And we should set high personal standards and pursue growth in character. And whoever we are, we should be transferring that to our external relationships, because that's what happened. Whoever we are in character, so if we are a quality person, we are then transferring quality to our external relationships, and then we should be getting it back. As we can see, our external relationships should be making us a better quality person. They should be doing the same. They should be truthful to us, correct us when we're wrong. Positive criticism, holding us accountable, help us maintain high standards, and encourage us to grow in character. Next, we have belief. In the internal environment, we should believe in ourselves, and then we should then transfer that belief system to our external environment. So let's go. We should support and pursue our dreams and passions. We should identify and affirm our virtues. We should encourage, inspire, and motivate ourselves. We should be our biggest cheerleaders. It's very important that when it comes on to supporting our dreams, when it comes on to identifying our own virtues, our wonderful virtues, we shouldn't be dependent on external factors or persons to be doing that. It's our primary responsibility to us to make sure that we have belief in ourselves. Then whatever it is that we have transferred to the external relationships, we should be getting that back. Our relationships should support our dreams and passions. They should identify and affirm our virtues, and they should encourage, inspire, and motivate us. What else could we desire or expect? There's nothing else. Anything else would be less than worthy. So next we have happiness. We should be making ourselves happy. It's our number one responsibility to make ourselves happy. Our happiness is not dependent on anyone else. A lot of times we expect other people to make us happy, but we are primarily responsible for making ourselves happy first. We should enhance our own peace of mind. If you remember the video we did recently about peace of mind, we spoke about the fact that your peace of mind is your number one priority. We should enrich our happiness. And whatever it is that we are doing internally with our own lives, as I said before, we are then giving that to persons we are in relationships with, and then they are giving it back to us. So they should be making us happy. They should enhance our peace of mind and enrich our happiness. Loyalty. This is very important. We should first be loyal to ourselves. If we are not loyal to ourselves, then we cannot expect anyone else to be loyal to us. So we should trust ourselves. We should stand up for ourselves. And we should do that for others. And then others also should do that for us. They should be loyal to us. They should keep our cherished secrets. They should defend us in our absence. That's the least you can expect from any external relationship. But are you doing that for yourself? Are you being loyal to yourself? Next, we are going to talk about care. We should care for ourselves. Now, when we say care, it's a very broad spectrum, because we all explain or we have different expectations where care is concerned. But I believe we should be considerate to ourselves. We should show ourselves empathy, understanding. We should show compassion for our own suffering and misfortunes. So often we have experienced negative things in our lives, and we are the hardest ones on ourselves. I can speak for that, for example. We, for example, do not bear in mind that at a time when we did certain things or made certain mistakes, that we never had the life experience, we never had the knowledge or so forth. And so it was inevitable that we were going to succumb to whatever misfortunes there were. And we must be empathetic to our own misfortunes. And we must pass these qualities in regards to care to our outside relationships, the ones outside ourselves. And they should also care for us. And they should be considerate to us. They should show us empathy, show compassion for our suffering and misfortunes. There's nothing worse than being in relationships with people who do not care for you. Whenever you tell them your negative experiences, they simply move on and gloss over them like they're nothing. It's utter contempt, and I would encourage you to pay attention to that. But before you can do that, you must first make sure that you are showing empathy to your own misfortunes before you can have those expectations of others. So there you have it. I'm going to move on to the next section in this video, and I hope you're learning a lot so far. So in this segment, we're going to do our audit. But let me do a review of what we discussed earlier. So we discussed some personal guidelines. Those are the characteristics that all auditors must have. And then we spoke about some accounting principles, revenues and expenses. And we spoke about some personal relationship principles, quality, belief, happiness, loyalty, and care that all relationships operate under. So now we're going to do our internal audit first and then our external audit. But before we do our audits, we're going to discuss some considerations. And it's in the form of some questions that I've come up with. Do you believe there's anything about your life that needs improving? I, for one, know that I'm not perfect, and there's always something to work on. There's always something to improve. Is the relationship with yourself important to you? I don't believe anyone would say that the relationship with themselves is not important. But is it really important to you? How do you know that? How do you know it's important to you? What are you doing to give evidence to what you believe? Are you the best judge of yourself? Most people, or some people, I used to believe that I was the best judge of myself. And I have learned that that's not always the case. It's always important to get feedback from outside sources, people we're in relationship with, people who love us and care for us, who embody the characteristics I mentioned earlier. Getting positive feedback is always important because we are not objective, no matter how much we might believe that. Have you been living your life on your terms or on the expectations of others? That's a tough one, because many of us live our lives based on whatever script or guideline we were given by upbringing, either our parents or our guardian, and we never questioned it. And then we tend to believe we are being objective, that we are living our lives on our own terms, that we have come up with these choices. The way we see life is the way we believe. We invented these beliefs, but no, a lot of these belief systems were passed on by people in our lives, and we are not living our lives on our own terms. We are living our lives based on other people's expectations, and it's something that you have to look at and you have to look into, because as I said, the relationship with ourselves is the one that we are most times unaware of and unconscious of and ignore and take for granted. And so this could be an area that you're living your life on the terms of others and you're not even conscious of it. Next, do you expect what was the main reason you made certain past mistakes? For me, it was based on a lack of knowledge. And then sometimes I question myself. I ask, so if I had the knowledge, would I have acted differently? And most times I tell you, the answer is no. I wouldn't have acted differently because I was not emotionally mature. And our emotions are what drives us, and they work hand in hand. You can know, but you still act contrary to what you feel. And that is why you have to discipline your emotions. And this question is very important because it goes to the foundation of that. Do you expect more of yourself than you do from others? A lot of times we expect more from others than we do from ourselves. And that's a matter of conditioning, how we have conditioned ourselves. We should be your number one fan, and we should never expect more from others than we do from ourselves. Are you your favorite person? We live in a culture where people are obsessed with celebrities, and they love celebrities more than they love themselves. And this is a fact. I cannot understand how it is that we are so obsessed, or we have become a culture where we are so obsessed with everything and everyone outside of ourselves, and we don't love ourselves. We are not our favorite persons. We should be our favorite persons. I vouch for that. Do you study yourself? You should make yourself a study. Do you understand the way you think? Why you think the way you think? Do you really study yourself? It's just like if you're going to study a particular subject in high school or college. You spend time with that subject. You want to know it. It's just the same when you're getting to know somebody. You spend time with them. You want to know them. You should have to employ that same, you need to employ that same type of discipline in knowing yourself. It is of utmost importance. But as I said earlier, we often ignore the relationship with ourselves, and this is one area we need to pay attention to. So we are going to move on to our internal audit. So we're going to look at what it is that's affecting us, our decisions, and then we're going to make certain conclusions. Nothing is absolute here. These are just my questions. These are just a guideline. And you can come up with your own questions for your life, because everybody's life is different. So let's start. Are you challenging yourself to become a better, happier person? We should be challenging ourselves to become a better, happier person. I don't think anybody would answer this question no. But maybe you would say maybe, I don't know. But I think it should be an absolute yes. Do you trust yourself to protect your best interests? And 3, do you believe you can achieve anything you set your mind to? Most people believe that they can do anything they believe, theoretically. But if you haven't done so, then it's very difficult to keep believing that. When we were children, we believed we could do anything. We believed anything we were told. If we were affirmed positively, we went along with that. But as we continue to live and we made mistakes, we had disappointments, then that belief in ourselves started to dissipate. But we must get to a place where we must believe we can do anything. Anything. It is a foundation for our success and happiness and thus enjoyment of life. We cannot pursue goals or achieve goals without that personal, entrenched belief in ourselves. That belief that we can do anything. Are you your biggest cheerleader? If you're not your biggest cheerleader, that is a big red flag. You should be your biggest cheerleader. Nobody should be cheering for you. Yes, we need outside support from time to time, but you should be your biggest cheerleader. Do you show yourself empathy and understanding? Oftentimes we do not. We are very judgmental, we are very harsh when it comes down to ourselves. And that is why we are so harsh with other individuals, because we are harsh with ourselves. It begins, as I said, with the internal, and then it goes to the external. Next question, do you have criteria? Do you have criteria that persons must meet before you let them in your life? Even a business, when they're hiring you, have an interview system. They have criteria that you must meet before you're employed. The qualifications, experience, they look at your character. That's why they want character references. There's so much thing they look at before employing you. When we meet people, and if there are no criteria, there are no boundaries, there are nothing for them to meet in terms of rules or regulations, then we're letting people in our lives that can damage us. And the people that we have in our lives should also have those standards, because it shows that they are quality people. So yes, we should have criteria for persons that we let in our life. Next, do you deliberately work on making improvements in different areas of your life? You should be making a deliberate effort to work on areas that need to be worked on. Next, do you have confidence in your talents and abilities? Let me ask you first, do you know what your talents and abilities are? Because before you can have confidence in them, you first have to do an assessment of that. You have to know what just like knowing what your strengths or weaknesses are. So if you know your talents and abilities, then you can move on from there and build confidence in them. Because it's your talents and abilities, my friends, that take you through this world. These are the things that define the person that you will become. If you have a purpose to fulfill, like we all do, you need to know what your talents and abilities are. Next, are you working on your weaknesses in order to become a stronger person? You should be working on your weaknesses. But first you need to know what your weaknesses are. Most people are confident that they can tell you their strengths, but they ignore their weaknesses. Weaknesses have to be worked on, so either they can become a strength, or at least they can be neutralized. So yes, you need to work on your weaknesses so that you can become a stronger person. And number 10, are you forgiving of your errors and mistakes? Many of us aren't, but we should be forgiving of our errors and mistakes. If you are forgiving of your errors and mistakes, then you will be forgiving of others. Do you hold yourself accountable? Positive self-criticism. This is about accountability. Accountability is very important. If you hold yourself accountable, then you are the benchmark. You can then hold other people accountable in your life. They must be accountable to you, but you have to first be accountable to yourself and to them. Then we can move on in our discussion and we can look at our analysis. I have here some ranges for yes responses. I don't know if you realize that we had 11 questions. We had an odd number because I would never want it to have any surprises. So if you had 0 to 3 yes responses, this is the lowest mark. I could say you're unsure of yourself and your future. You possibly find it unpleasant being you, and you need to work on the areas of your life that hinder in your success. So this is very important. This is the lowest mark. None of us are going to say we are toxic individual and we are polluted, but it is something we have to be pay attention to. Hopefully no one falls within the range of 0 to 3. So let's move on to the next range. Our next range is yes responses from the range 4 to 7. This means that you have strengths but still vulnerable to many personal weaknesses. We all have personal weaknesses and things that we have to work on. If you're within this range, it shows that you have potential. You definitely have strengths, you have weaknesses, but you can continuously make improvement. You possess potential to grow and to become better. Just as I said, yes, you can become better. You have the potential. You are right there within this zone where you can do anything. Our next range is our 8 to 11 range. And we are looking at yes responses, as I said before. If you're within this range, we can say you have worked on yourself and you continue to make improvements, and you're able to positively impact others around you. This is the range we want to be at. I don't think that anyone at all would score a perfect 11 out of 11 questions as yes, because there's always room for improvement in the human dimension. And so you can bear this in mind, that you want to be in the 8 to 11 range, but if you are lower, if you honestly never got as much as 8 questions answered yes or correctly in that sense, don't feel hopeless. We all have something to grow on. I would still put myself at maybe an 8 or maybe a 7 or maybe a 6. In some areas, it all depends. We all have things to work on. So as I said before, please be forgiving of yourself. Just work on these areas, and this audit is just a guide. It's nothing to judge you. So we're going to do our external audit, but we're going to consider some questions first before we go into our external audit. So here are some considerations. Should we expect more from some types of relationships versus others? And if you can look here, you see that I have A, B, C. I categorize certain relationships. So in here we have family versus spouse. Should you expect more of your family versus your spouse? And I'm talking, your spouse is your family, but I'm talking about your family, your parents, your siblings. Should you expect more of them versus your spouse? Should you expect more of your family versus your friends? Well, most people would say, no, most definitely. I expect my family to be there more for me. Number 3, your family versus your relatives. Your relatives are your extended family. I'm talking about your uncles, aunts, and grandparents. So if you look at A, your family versus spouse is your most difficult one. The thing is this, when you were born within your family, when you came into existence, your family was expected or obligated to give you certain things. For instance, your parents were supposed to give you guidance, protection, love. There are certain things that you would have gotten within your family from your siblings. When you grew up and you transitioned into forming other types of relationships, for instance, when you got married and you now have a spouse, me personally, I believe that my spouse owes me more of an obligation in regards to certain things. My family will always be my family, and they should always love me, and I will always love them. But where my spouse is concerned, I took an oath. I went before God with this individual. I believe that I owe this person more obligation, and this person owes me more obligation also than their family. This is my subjective opinion. You might think differently, but all of these belief systems affect the way we audit our relationships and the way we see life and relationships. It is very intricate. It forms our perceptions, our philosophy about relationships, and everything about life. So it's something you should consider. So B, our spouse versus our family, our spouse versus our friends. And C, our friends versus our family, and our friends versus our spouse. There are many persons who their friends have been there for them more than their family or their spouse. Friendships are very important, even though they are an external relationship, and I will consider them secondary to your family, in a sense. But the fact is that because we are all different, we are all unique, you can have some relationships that are following you that you're carrying from kindergarten, and these persons have been tested and proven. They have been tested with fire, and they have always been there for you. But you haven't gotten the same sort of reverence from your family. So you might, with C, say your friends, you expect more from your friends versus your family, because your family haven't been there for you like that, or your friends versus your spouse. Now let's consider some other considerations. Should we consider how long we have known someone when we are doing an audit of the relationship? Should the length of time you know someone be a consideration? Yes and no. That's my personal opinion. You see, if you're going by the principles I mentioned, quality, belief, happiness, loyalty, and care, I do not believe that the time frame is that important, because these are fundamentals that you must expect from anyone in a relationship, and you do not need a lifetime to prove that you're worthy, or you portray these qualities, or you can impart these qualities to my life. But yes, length of time is not irrelevant, in the sense that the longer you know someone is the longer time they have to prove certain things to you. And so in that sense, I believe that the time frame that you know someone is a factor. Next, should we consider their past, their bringing experiences, emotional maturity? All of these things are a factor. But it goes back to you, because if you're going to do an audit, are you going to say, all right, I can bypass this flaw this person has, or I can overlook this shortcoming because they experienced that, they had that bad experience, or they are not emotionally mature as the other individual? You can do that. It's left up to you. I think that it does play a role, I don't think that everything is black and white. I think that sometimes things are subjective, because some people don't have the emotional maturity. Some people, because they were brought up a particular way, they were socialized a particular way. And just like you have cultures, different countries have cultures, different families have different heritage or different cultures. And so they might not know that they should be expressive, for example, of how they feel. And they will only render affection in certain circumstances. These are things you should consider. I would consider them, but it's not everything. It's just a part of the equation. The next question is, should we find out what the relationship means for them? If you are going to enter into a relationship with someone, remember earlier I spoke about when a company is going, or a business is going to hire an employee, it does an interview. We should always be interviewing the persons we are in relationship with, because we need to know if we are on the same page. Do we have the same expectations? Do we see the relationship the same way? Because internal relationships feed into external relationships. And so it's not, I am feeling a particular way, or I value the relationship in a particular way, and then you are on this side and you have different expectations. So it's something that you should look into, and I think it is very important. So let's go to our external relationship audit. Would they assist you? Number one, and we are talking about people in our lives, would they assist you if you needed money for an urgent matter? This is a very good question. Some people are married to their money. They would give you food, they can grant you a favor, but they won't give you their money. I think this is a very good question, and it could be a measuring stick, a benchmark by which you measure your relationships. Number two, if you never had anywhere to live, would they help you? I'm not talking about somebody personally taking you in, but would they assist you again with money, or could they give you some direction? Number three, if you had a medical emergency, could you count on them for physical or emotional support? This goes without question. I believe that any relationship that you have, you should be able to count on these individuals for personal or emotional support. If you had a medical emergency, for heaven's sakes, it is a medical emergency, and you should do the same. So if you are in relationships where you are not getting this, I think that's a big red flag. Next, if you had a personal problem and needed someone to talk to, would they be willing to listen to you? Not everyone is a good listener. I can tell you that by experience. But I believe it's fair to say that they should try and listen to you, just like you should try and listen to them, whoever it is that might need someone to talk to. Number five, if you had a matter you wanted to remain secret, could you share it with them? This again is very personal, is very subjective. Not everyone has the character base for you to share your secrets with. And you shouldn't believe because you're in a relationship, you should tell them everything. Now, let me go further and explain this. I used to believe that once you're in a relationship with someone, that you should be able to tell them certain things. And I have learned the hard way. You cannot tell everyone everything about your life, especially when you have met them. You have to get to understand that person. You have to understand their own biases, because everybody sees things through different lenses, and therefore they have their own biases, and they might judge you wrongfully if you do not keep your secrets to yourself and you give them away too early. So it is based on the relationship. You have to make your own, you have to come to your own conclusions, but I believe it's a person-to-person basis. So number six, would they hold you accountable when you're wrong? If you're in a relationship with someone, for example, now let me go back to you, because it begins with you. If you don't hold yourself accountable, then you don't want to be held accountable by anyone. If I hold myself accountable, I definitely want others to hold me accountable. because I'm holding them accountable. You cannot hold others accountable if you're not holding yourself accountable. If you are wrong, you want to be told that you're wrong. Why, if you're wrong, you wouldn't want to be told that you're wrong? Why would you get upset? That doesn't make any sense. It is something of a character flaw, a serious character flaw, if you don't want to be corrected. So that's something that you need to look into if you have a problem with being corrected when you're wrong. Next, would they support your dream if they can't see how you would achieve it? Now, many of us are doubting Thomases, and only if we see it, we believe it. But I believe when it comes down to people that we care about, if we are living by the principles that I've discussed throughout this video, then you should support anyone that's in your life unconditionally. Yes, there are exceptions to the rules, because if someone is just a talker, they have not done anything, then there's nothing to support. You wouldn't believe in them naturally. But if this person is a person that honestly believes in themselves, and you're seeing that they're putting in the effort, then you should believe in them, even if you can't see how they're going to achieve it. Number 8, do they make you a happier person? That goes without questions. Who want to be with somebody that's making them an unhappy person? Yes, people should be making you a happier person if they're in your life. Number 9, are they happy for your successes? Many people are not happy for other people's successes because they have no successes of their own. It's a complicated thing. In the book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, Steve Covey speaks about having an abundance mentality. When we have an abundance mentality, when we believe that there's more of the same thing out there for everyone, and I'm talking about success, happiness, riches, fame, whatever it is, then we don't have a limited mindset. People who have a limited mindset, he says, have a scarcity mentality. Anybody that's in your life that's not happy, that is not happy for your successes, I would be very suspicious of that relationship, and you should really think about it, because that's a big red flag. Number 10, do they encourage you to become a better person? If they are not a better person, then they are not going to encourage you to become a better person. That is why, as I tell you, the benchmark is you. But yes, this is an expectation, and anyone in your life should be encouraging you to become a better person. Number 11, do they show compassion and empathy for your misfortunes? Yes, they should be showing compassion and empathy for your misfortunes. If they are not, then you should consider I won't say it, but I was going to say eliminating them from your life. But it is a big red flag, and you should consider that, because people should have an empathy. We should have empathy for ourselves, and then for people we are in relationships with, and we should expect, it's the least you can expect of people that you're in relationships with, people who say they care about you. Next, let's look at our analysis here. So we are looking at the yes responses. So we have 11 questions. So our first range is 0 to 3. So people who are within this range, you must spend little to no time with these people unless it's absolutely necessary. These people are bad for you, and I cannot warn you enough. You should do what is necessary, but I wouldn't have them in my life. Only tell them insignificant things about your life, things you would tell anyone. These people are not going to be happy for your successes, my friends. Don't fool yourself. So tell them only limited things about yourself, things that you would tell anybody. Next, you might consider moving on from these relationships. These relationships are not good for you, and that's my opinion. But if you only get in 3 out of 11 questions as a yes, that is a red flag for me, and I don't think it's a worthy relationship. And I'm going to explain further why it is not a worthy relationship. And as I said before, Whatever is happening on the inside is reciprocated on the outside relationship. So if you are not within a 0 to 3 range, I don't need to tell you what to do. Next, we are going to look at our other range, and it's a 4 to 7 range. If you had 4 to 7 yeses out of 11, out of these 11 questions, and the first one is you should share only selective information about your successes. These people are still in a growth phase. You don't know how far they are. If they are a 4, or they are a 6, or they are a 7 or a 5. You don't know. You should be very selective. You should act according to whatever it is you know about them, judging from the base of their character. Next, depend on them being there for you for certain things. Within this range, people, I won't say flaky, but it is a case-by-case basis. So if they believe in a particular thing or they want to do certain things for you, they will do it for you. But it's not unconditional. In this range also, we must be realistic about the value of the relationship. It might mean more to you than it does to them. So yes, valuing, you have to scrutinize the relationship and be realistic about it. And these people are better people, better quality people than the people in the 0 to 3 range. But again, it's a case-by-case basis, so you have to do your own evaluation. And then we have our 8 to 11 range, which is our highest range. So these individuals, they believe in you. That goes without explanation. They affirm your virtues, your morals, the good things about you. They are your confidant. You share your secrets with them. There is a foundation of trust with these relationships. You can be vulnerable with them. You can rely on them if needed. So the 8 to 11 range is the highest range, and there is nobody, I believe, that will get 11 out of 11 questions as yes. Because just like how we are fallible, our relationships, our people who are in relationships are also imperfect. So it's a case-by-case basis. But I've said that so many times. But you have to judge it subjectively. Now look at this chart. I'm comparing each level of the relationship based on 0 to 3 range, 0 to 3 range in the internal relationship versus our external relationship. And I do it for each of the ranges. And all of these relationships feed into each other. Whoever you are, that's what you represent to your external relationships, and that's what you get back. Because these people would be at the same level. They'll be giving you what you're giving them. And I must add this, I never mentioned it earlier, but if you're in a quality relationship, if you are a quality person and you embody that, and you are giving quality to someone on the outside, but they are not a quality individual, they won't be able to receive it, and vice versa. So I need to explain that, because if you look at this chart, I'm going to explain it even further. Look at the internal relationship and external relationship, and we're at the 0 to 3 range. So at this level, you more than likely are going to have been in relationships with people who are at your level. There are exceptions where you can see these arrows pointing, where you might have people in the 4 to 7 range and you might have people in the 8 to 11 range. These people might be your family members, or they might be your friends, but on a selective basis. But I can speak as a matter of fact that people in the 0 to 3 range do not seek people at higher ranges to build friendships with, and they do not have meaningful relationships with people above that level, because they just don't qualify. They don't have the quality to maintain relationships with people at these higher levels. So if they have relationships with people in the higher levels, they are exceptions to the norm, and normally these relationships are strained. They are not very fluid or fluent. Because they are out of their range. The people that they will more relate to are the people within their range. They are just as toxic and polluted as they are. So these people, so that chart explains that. Now let's go to another chart. So we're at the 4 to 7 range. At the 4 to 7 range, you can see those arrows going back and forth. So more than likely you're going to attract or want to be in relationships with people who are at that range, the range that you're located at. And yes, sometimes we still entertain people from the lower range. You can look at that blue arrow that goes up to the 0 to 3 range, because sometimes when you're at a particular range, you're still working on things. And so you might have people, unfortunately, from the lower ranges. Now, as you grow further, your range grows, and you definitely will not have people when you go to another range. You won't have people that low that you are deliberately keeping in your life. You can see also from this chart the red arrow, and it goes to the 8 to 11 range. You are not seeking people in the 8 to 11 range because that's not your standard. That's not necessarily who you are. You are not there yet. And it depends on where you are in the 4 to 7 range. Say you are at a level 7. You might have friends or be able to maintain relationships with people at a higher level. You are still a work in progress, but you might be, it depends on you as an individual. But as a matter of research, from what I have read and understood, normally we don't go that direction. Most times we go at our level or lower than where we're at. So our last range is the 8 to 11 range. At this range, we are informed, we are growing as an individual. We are positive, we are optimistic, we are influencing other persons around us, we are impacting other people's lives. And we normally keep friendships or have maintained relationships with persons who are at our level. There are exceptions, as you can see from the diagram, that you might have relationships or connections to people at the lower level. You don't go seeking these individuals. You might have these people in your life on the basis that, again, they might be family members, or they might be friendships, people that you really care about, but you are not going out extraordinarily looking for these type of people. These relationships that you might have might be long-standing relationships coming from your childhood. And the relationships, again, might not be fluent because they are not at your level. So you might not be able to relate to them as it pertains to certain things because they're just out of your range. They're not within the your qualifications. They don't meet your qualifications. My tongue is becoming twisted. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. That's our audit, and I've gone through and explained the different ranges. Now, all of this is just my personal opinion and the guidelines that I've come up with, but I hope it was useful. Now let's move on to the next segment of our video. So here are my final common sense thoughts. Audits are accounting principle, but we can apply the principle of an audit to our own lives. We are most times very informal about our relationships, especially the one that we have with ourselves. And we can be having bankrupt relationships and be totally unaware of it. I brought out a lot of key points today in the video. It is a lot of information, especially if you're not from an accounting background. But it is just to give you some guideline and some direction that you can use for your own, on your own, in your own time, to think and come up with some resolutions for your own questions you might have about the relationships that you're having. And there are other things that can be audited apart from your relationships. If you have problems with spending, you can audit your finances. You can audit things about your emotions. Why do you feel the way you feel, and where did these emotions come from? You can audit your beliefs. Why do you believe certain things? Was it given to you by your parents, or was it a natural evolution in your maturity? There are so many things that can be audited, and I want you to expand your thinking. A video like this is very limited. You can't cover all the information, but from what I have discussed today, you have learned that there are different types of relationships, and you have learned that relationships help us to connect with ourselves and with other individuals. And you have learned also that relationships are a reflection of us. Whatever persons, especially those persons that we brought in our lives, we were given our family, but we were brought other persons that we ourselves, our intimate relationships and our friendships, we brought these persons in our lives. They are a direct reflection of who we are as an individual. If we want to become a quality person, then we have the power to change. Like Jim Rohn said, for things to change, you have to change. And we do possess the power to change. Why don't you do an audit today? Start out with just examining your own self. Look at your relationship with yourself. And you can use the questions that I had given you as a base, and you can build on that and maybe come up with your own questions. I tell you, it is a very interesting process. I did an audit with those ranges that I mentioned, from 0 to 3, from 4 to 7, and from 8 to 11. And I personally don't keep certain persons' number in my phone anymore. These persons don't call me, they don't respond to my texts. They have utter contempt for me. This is not a meaningful relationship, and it is very toxic to my life, very devastating to me emotionally. We have to go through one by one and sift through our contacts and the people that we have relationships with and make some personal decisions. So there you have it, guys. That's my video for today. I hope it was meaningful to you. It was certainly meaningful to me, passing on this information. And until my next video, always remember to learn it, become it, and share it.